This is kind of cool. I have to be honest. When I was reading his bio, I was like, this guy's here than I. He's outside of his professional business. He's managing direttore, I guess is how you say it in Italian, the Italian car show in Pittsburgh. So that's pretty cool. I'd love to hear more about that. So, and he's currently their social media marketing director at the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. So everyone, please let's welcome Mr. Bernie Martin. Thank you. Thank you.
It's the cortile, and it's the Italian portion of the car show, the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. So there's a whole series of car shows, 10 days of events, and 200,000 people. And just a plug for the Grand Prix, it's a benefit for autism, so it's all a big charity event, but we're the only vintage race on city streets in the world outside of Monte Carlo. So if you get a chance, you want to come see it. I'm here to talk to you today, obviously, about this subject. Back me up one. Oh. iPads versus tablets in the office, is it the new standard? Maybe I need to stand over on this side. We saw this slide. Move forward. We could approach this, and here's my dilemma. We could approach this a number of ways. We could talk about this technology from a user perspective. We can talk about this technology from an operating system perspective. And we could talk about this as a feature comparison about what's out there in the tablet market. The user's perspective would probably be the most interesting one because as most users, they're only going to share the negative side of things. And that's why the arrow points to that end of the elephant, because that's what you would generally hear. The problem is that when we only talk about those three things, we're not really looking at the entire environment that this elephant, if you will, lives in. And so you've got to look at the range, the weather, and a number of other factors that impact that elephant. So you can talk about why the elephant's healthy, or what's going on with the elephant, but we're going to delve into a whole bunch of other issues, and I don't mean to be confusing, so save your questions, but if you have something that's immediately confusing, certainly raise your hand. I like to do outlines at the beginning. It bothers me to sit in presentations and not know what's coming down the pike, or, oh my God, how long is this going to be? So here's kind of the outline for today. We're going to look at a forest view first. We're going to look at who the players are, and some of them might not be who you might think. We're then going to delve into it and look at how Web 2.0 and social media impact mobile devices, including tablets. And then we're going to look at how mobile devices impact Web 2.0 and social media. Then we're going to delve down into the trees and take a look at some very specific things and some mobile options. And finally, we'll open it up for Q&A. As we go through this process, I'd like you to make some mental notes. So keep this in the back of your head. The hardware industry is being driven by software tech. The software tech is being driven by the hardware tech. The technology is driving communications and productivity. The communication is driving innovation. And in turn, the innovation is driving the technology. So it's all circular. To understand this a little bit better, we need to put it in perspective, and this is how some of this stuff came about. It has to be the right time and the right place for things to happen. Technology is changing communications. This is a picture of a printing press. Gutenberg invents the printing press, and he could not have invented that printing press had he not been where he was located in Germany. It's a winemaking region. It's a very big winemaking region, so they have wine presses. The technology to make silver embedded letters and put them down on papyrus had existed for a long time. But he combined two different technologies, put them together, and now you can create a printing machine. That printing machine then changes communications. Trade guilds start up. As a result of those trade guilds, you have Middle Ages seeing a huge period of enlightenment because the communication improves. People can talk to each other about their industries, about what they do. So across the board, everything starts to improve. Mobile today is driving that communication right now. As we go through this, you're going to see this little icon that says ancient history. And any time you see this icon, it's old news. So remember the icon when you see it. We're going to go out here and say, let's look at what just happened. So we've got to know our limitations. The picture of the hurricane hitting is apropos because it's the day before the hurricane hits. That's the limitation that I have today. Tomorrow, everything could change. More than likely tomorrow, everything will change. There's going to be several announcements. Some of them are already starting to happen, but the big announcement is iOS 5. So the iPad and the iPhone are probably, let's put it this way, nobody has vacation tomorrow at Apple, nobody has vacation tomorrow at Facebook. So, and there's an announcement scheduled. So something's going to happen. But back here a little bit. This past summer, Google introduced the Google Plus project. Google Plus is something to compete with Facebook. So it's more of a personal site where you can create your own personal profile. Most recently, Facebook had their FA conference. This was September 22nd. At that conference, Mark Zuckerberg said something very unique recently happened the week before the FA. They had in one single day over 1 billion people log into Facebook. This is all old news. What's happening now and what's on the horizon, in preparation for this to happen, there's all kinds of news leaking out about iOS 5 and the Apple product. So there's cases that started to appear in different sizes. You're seeing that various news releases coming from places like the LA Times. And then every once in a while something slips into where there's another piece of news that hits. The big thing to pay attention to, and this is as of Friday, and this is obviously changing right now as we speak, is the Facebook Spartan project is now going to be integrated with Apple. So Facebook doesn't have an app on the iPad. There's some backstory to that. The guy who helped develop that now works at Google, and he says it was done in May. So there's been a hold off on this for a reason that there's a lot of conjecture about. So everything that we're going to talk about today is valid until Tuesday, tomorrow. And then the next big thing happens. And the next big thing is the Android conference, which is on October 9th and 11th. So this month, we're going to see a lot of transition happening. We're going to go back now and look at how technology adoption has kind of happened. So back in 1981, who was in this industry in 81? All right, so sometime in 1981, you decided you needed a fax machine. Before that day, you didn't need a fax machine. But after that day, you needed a fax machine to do business. Sometime around 1994, 95, you decided you needed an email address. The day before that, you didn't need an email address. Today, we've got three things happening at one time. They're happening together. There's mobile applications. You've got kids and students using mobile. You've got a ton of social media stuff happening. And then you've got cloud computing. And they're all happening together. This kind of presents a problem for different generations and different businesses. So baby boomers are very comfortable talking face-to-face to people. Talking on the, let's just pick up the phone, make a phone call, and handle it. Sure, I can look at the computer, but I'm going to talk to you on the phone. Then you've got the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers came of age, basically, when email was hitting. So they're pretty comfortable sending an email. Texting, maybe not so much, but it's coming around. They get it. Then you've got Gen Y. And if you've hired anybody recently from the Gen Y generation, you know that they have a different outlook. And the reason they have a different outlook is because they grew up with this technology surrounding them. It's been around them. So when I was in grade school and I passed a note from Nancy to Mary under the desk, and hopefully the nun didn't catch me for something, but I got yelled at. These kids in Gen Y grew up texting underneath the desk. So they can carry on a conversation with you today and carry on a whole other conversation at the same time. That's part of them. The interesting thing is what's next. Oh, I'm sorry, and Gen Ys generally turn the baby boomers on their heads, drive them crazy. What's next is this next generation of kids. So if this group of kids from Gen Y that's in the market now grew up surrounded by it, there's actually studies now that are saying that this Gen Z that's coming out, the way the synapses are forming in their head is different from everybody in this room. The technology is embedded in them. They grew up around this. It's part of them. So little kids with blogs, and you don't have a blog, that kid has a blog. He gets it. I want to look at a site real quick. This is a YouTube site. So this is Husky StarCraft. My 12-year-old tells me that Husky is somewhere between 16 and 20 years old. The important thing to note about Husky StarCraft is right here. That's his page views. He has 232 million page views on his website. He also has modified this site. If you've been to YouTube channels, this doesn't look like a lot of YouTube channels, but there's like live active buttons on here. So you can give this a thumbs up right in the video. The other thing is he's monetizing this site. So he's selling ads on this site. And this is a screenshot from Friday, and if you read his latest posting, can you imagine a business that has a YouTube channel with 232 million page views, and he just created a website for the first time? This is what this generation's growing up like. Now, a short story about, one more story about these kids. A friend of mine is president of a company in Southern California. And Bob calls me up and said, I had this great conversation with my daughter. I told my daughter that I want to buy my grandson, I want to get him a class in programming. And he's in 3rd grade, so I think that's a bit too young, but his daughter also happens to teach 3rd grade. So she went into class and she said, do any of you kids in this room, have you ever had a programming class? And the one little boy raises his hand and he says, oh yeah, I have an app. It's a fart app. I have $54,000 in my bank account for college from my fart app. Now this isn't his fart app, but that's what these kids are doing. They've embraced this technology. That's what's coming down the pipe. Now let's talk about where the technology's at right now today. So Gartner, which does research on tech, recently released some stuff, and I'm going to hit some headlines here for you. So in 2010, Apple had, and I guess I should say this. This is some indication of how you need to base your decisions. So I'm giving you this backstory so that you can have more information in the backstory. This is the forest picture stuff. So Apple's market share was 83% last year. This year they're at 73%. So they've dropped. Android is at 17% globally. That's where they're projected to finish out in Q4. The tablet market has increased 261% from 2010. So does it make sense to have it in your business? It keeps going up. And then when you just saw flash across the screen, the Gartner report came out on September 22nd. That thing that flashed across the screen came out last night. And it's an updated and revised report, and the numbers got higher. So worldwide tablet sales this year are going to be 63 million units. The Android and the iOS, the Android units and the Apple iOS dominate this market. Nobody else is going to have more than 5% of the market through 2011. Tablet sales by 2015 are going to reach 326 million. According to the VP of Gartner, Apple's going to maintain over a 50% market share through 2014. Back then, and these are the people with the fax machine, when I went to college, I did my term papers on a typewriter and a Mac SE because that was the advent of it. It's like, oh, this is awesome, I can edit, I don't have to use the whiteout. So the big change from typewriters to laptops that we've gone through is the change that we're now going through compared to then with tablets. And this is happening in conjunction with something else that you've probably heard of, and that's Web 2.0 versus Web 1.0. So quite simply, and I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this, but in the Web 1.0 world, this is the billboard ad. So you look at the billboard, you pick up the phone, you call the phone. In the Web 2.0 world, you talk to the billboard, and the billboard talks back to you. And you can let your friends know that, I don't like this product on the billboard, and if the billboard doesn't address you correctly and answer your question, everybody gets to see that that wasn't handled very well. Or maybe it was, and I want to deal with this brand. So the hardware and the software and the clouds are all evolving together. And their big thing is that the tablet, this change in the hardware and Web 2.0 are having a direct effect on each other. They're driving each other. It's all happening at a parallel rate. Kind of scary, isn't it? Especially if you're a Gen Xer and even baby boomer. So here's who's more scared of your clients. IT departments and marketing and PR. IT departments just got sideswiped hard. For years, they've worked in a Microsoft world. Their view of Apple was this. That's what they thought of Apple. The tablet market, given its market share, is Apple. Second thing that scares them about that is they've lost complete control of what happens outside the office because it's mobile. So what's going to happen when somebody's kid touches this, or plays with it, or gets baby food on it? The other half of this is the marketing and PR departments, and here's where we're going to probably see dramatic shifts from the hierarchical management structure that we've had for many years to a more fluid, dynamic management structure and who's responsible for what, and that management decision-making is going to be pushed down over time. Because PR used to control the message. They used to control the whole brand. Right now, they don't. They write a press release and it gets edited, chopped apart, split up, and sent back to them and says, you made a mistake. Because now people can comment on that. It's not being written for editors, it's being written for consumers. So marketing's ended up with that ball. Marketing now has to deal with customers directly. Now they've been good at messaging, they've been good at doing videos, they've been good at doing catalogs and websites, but now all those bullet points on those catalogs and websites they have to respond to. So now the marketing person who may not be familiar with, say, a very teched out product, looks at that, and we'll use a car as an analogy. So if the marketing person, because we're all familiar with cars, so if the marketing person puts out a tweet that says, this thing's amazing, when you push this down, it goes faster. And people are like, yeah, it's a gas pedal. Okay, but you don't know that, but the consumers of that, especially in the B2B world, at that tech level, are much more attuned to the nuances of the product. Marketing has to address that. And then they sit there and, over at a beer at a conference, can you believe that this guy tweeted this? And what happens? The sales department and the customer services, yeah, we know that. We've been hearing these stories for years. Here's how you need to address them. So you're going to have a change in how marketing and sales blend and who's in charge of it over time. We've got to look at social media because social media, everything we're talking about really relates to social media as well, and how Web 2.0 overlays on that. So understanding how this drives the market is important. So social media in a nutshell, real simply. Twitter is something that's like a stock ticker that rides across your screen. It's immediate information for you to consume. Facebook right now tends to be more personal so that you can say things about you personally, reconnect with high school friends, reconnect with college friends, or open it up if you want. And then there's branding on Facebook for brand pages. Foursquare, Facebook used to have, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but this is the top ones. Foursquare has supplanted Facebook Places because Foursquare was already in that place. Great for, if you're not familiar with Foursquare and you have retail clients, in the B2C world, Foursquare is a nicer, it has the potential to be nicer than Yelp. Quora's for the real geeks. If you have a Quora account, that's where you can do way more than 140 characters and you're having deep conversations with people who write code. It's the Slashdot of yesteryear. Then there's YouTube. You're all familiar with YouTube and LinkedIn. How this impacts mobile, Apple is devouring the Android right now. And kind of staying in kind of the topic at hand here, here's how Android feels about that. Google, and you notice it says Googleopoly, and watch where the arrows go as we go through this because they're relevant. Google owns a lot of things. You may or may not know what they own. So, you know they own YouTube, you know they own Gmail, you know they own Blogger, they own Android. So knowing that there's two platforms out there and Android and Apple dominate this, Google owns Android. I need you to start thinking about how companies compete with each other and who competes where. Let's look at YouTube in some detail. YouTube has 490 million unique users worldwide per month. They have 92 billion with a B, page views each month. They have 2.9 billion hours a month. That's over 325,000 years. More than 400 tweets per minute containing a YouTube link come out. The average user spends 15 to 25 minutes a day. There's more content uploaded on YouTube in a 60-day period than the 3 network broadcasters have put together in 60 years. Oh yeah, it's free. And it runs on something called Flash. So remember we talked about Gutenberg, and we talked about how he had to have the wine press and the silver plate to kind of put the concepts together. So without Flash being invented by Adobe, YouTube wouldn't exist. And there's a couple other pieces of software that had to pre-exist before YouTube could exist economically. You couldn't write this code, so they pieced together some modules of things. The problem with Flash is it doesn't run on an iPad. You get this error message on it. And the Android, since Google owns it, loves Flash. Works very well with Flash. There's something in the background that's starting to happen though, and it's called HTML5. And we're going to delve a little bit into HTML5 because you should be aware of it. This is going to be a big thing. HTML5 is everything becomes an app. HTML5 is an app, and everything else goes into it. So this is Roger McNamee. Does anybody recognize Roger McNamee's name? Roger McNamee is one of the biggest investors in Facebook. The Forbes family still has a controlling interest in Forbes, but he effectively owns Forbes, National Geographic, History Channel. It touches a lot of things, Microsoft. He also has a pretty cool band called Moon Alice. Roger McNamee was speaking recently, and he said HTML5 is a game changer. It's going to be the first major upgrade in the web, and it's going to be monetizable differentiation of content. That may sound confusing, but understand that HTML5 is really, really going to be big. Because in Hamburg, Germany last week, a company announced that there's new software for animations without Flash. SlideShare last week dumped Adobe Flash in favor of HTML5. So if you're posting your slides in SlideShare online, which is a great way to share, it's no longer Flash, it's HTML5. Facebook announced last week, and pay attention to the dates again on some of these postings. So this is October 1st. Facebook announced they're going to launch HTML5 next week. So when I say that the storm's coming, this is like right now. Oh, and Apple always used HTML5. Apple rolled the dice. They gambled here. and that this would be the de facto standard coming down the pipe. So they've been HTML5 compliant since the very beginning. The interesting thing, and this is something I just posted to a Fast Company article that came out, Wolfram Alpha. The new iOS is rumored to have something called Siri, S-I-R-I. Today, literally an hour ago, it was announced that Apple bought Siri. What Siri is an interactive discussion. So whereas in the past, you would have to touch things, we don't communicate, according to Steve Jobs, as human beings by touching things. It's nice, but our primary form of communication is conversation. So we should be able to have a conversation and ask questions. Wolfram Alpha right now is a great place. There's an app for that. It already exists. Siri is either based upon this technology or somehow connecting to this technology. To be candid, I don't know the answer. But you can ask a question. I want to have sushi within 4 miles of here that has a 4-star rating or a 5-star rating, and it spits you answers back. So the web is going to be interactive. So I needed to call Apple to wire this into this, because this is a brand new Mac here. And I dealt with a computer on the front side that was like a person. And it walked me through a whole bunch of stuff. So let's understand who has what. There's 2 main operating systems, if we haven't already established that. There's the Apple iOS and the Google Android. Who makes Android tablets? Everybody. Similar to Microsoft back in the day, and notice we haven't talked about Microsoft. They've licensed this operating system out to just about everybody. So the decision between an Apple and something else is really a decision between operating systems in the tablet world and what functionality you have. Different people using the Android platform use them for different reasons. And they make not just stuff for tablets. They make stuff for computers, they make stuff for robotic assembly, they make kiosk software, they make copier software, and that ain't it. They make a whole, that OS is used in a whole bunch of things. When we look at the comparisons between the 2 operating systems, there's a number of differences. One is a private network. Apple has always maintained that if you write an application for us, it's going to be sent to Apple, we're going to review it, we're going to approve it, it goes out, it doesn't have malicious code. Android is wide open. You want to write an app for it, you can write an app for it. That's how Android leapfrogged over Apple in the number of apps that are available. Because you got an app, it's a good app, people can use it. Now, if that app happens to have phishing software behind it, if it happens to grab your bank account behind it, it's open. There's no safety behind this. That's how the model is right now. But this Cage Match article was written from January 18th of this year. This is all ancient history. What happens tomorrow, what happens in the next 2 weeks can change all this. And we're primarily talking about the announcements we know from Apple. We haven't seen how Google upstages this with Android coming out here in October, in another week or so. So, Android versus Apple, it's ancient history. We don't know. I apologize, I can't answer the questions because whatever I tell you today, it could all be different tomorrow. But we haven't talked about Microsoft. And remember when everybody talked about Microsoft, and if you're old enough to remember, when they talked about Microsoft and Apple duking it out for market share. Well, I attended a conference in ancient history in 1994 at the Commonwealth Club when I lived in California. And they brought a gentleman up on stage who was one of the founders at DARPA who helped write the internet. And this is in Cupertino, mind you. And they said, we'd like to ask you a question. What do you think between Microsoft and Apple? What's the difference between them? And if you say something bad about Apple, we'll have security get you out of time. And what he said was something very interesting, and it's philosophically how they develop. He said, if you understand how software development happens, It's kind of like going down a deer path. So the people, the Donner Party coming to California as settlers, followed a deer path that eventually became a bigger trail. And when it became that bigger trail, then they created roads around that. And over time, they built tunnels for that. Apple approaches things a little bit differently, because that's more or less just kind of moving with the flow of development, letting it go where it needs. I'm not saying they don't have a plan, but philosophically, it's a little bit different. Apple, when they're going to do a new OS, basically rewrites all that stuff. So they come in and they say, we're going to build that new tunnel through the building. But when we build that new tunnel, through the mountain, we build that new tunnel, we're going to make that deer path back into a deer path. We're going to make it so that you can't go down this piece of code and fall off a bridge because they left the roadway there. Whereas Microsoft at that time, the way he described it, was they kind of leave that deer path in that old tunnel, so you go into the tunnel and it crashes and you're stuck there. When we look today at Apple and Google, philosophically, Google kind of replaces Microsoft, and the people at Google would probably kill me for saying that, but really by having an open OS, I mean, this becomes like a piece of Swiss cheese. There's so many different operating systems out there, there's so many ways that you can hack into this thing, and they're all the same, so how are you going to get it? And this stuff's all breaking news, so this is October 2nd at 7:17 p.m. There's a number of things hitting right now about what's being hacked in Android. They've been talking about this for a while. It's finally seems to be starting to hit the news quite recently. We're seeing more and more of it. So the big player on the Android platform, when we get the hardware, when we look at the iPad 2, the Samsung Galaxy, different size screens, different price points on this, lots of functionality. And you're certainly welcome to download this screen. I'll happily send you the links if you would like more of this. But once again, this is very quickly going to become ancient history. The Kindle Fire, which is an Android platform, was just released. It's going to be a tablet computer for under $200. It was announced Thursday. Friday, they had 95,000 pre-orders. The beautiful thing about this is you can browse the web, you can watch movies, you can read books, and it's connected to this massive Amazon network, Amazon servers, everything that you can do with it. What it can't do is it doesn't have a camera, it doesn't have cell phone compatibility or capability, and it's a relatively small screen. So it has functions for the right audience. BlackBerry. Does anybody have Blackberries? Blackberries? Okay. BlackBerry has a playbook. Remember, this is that 5% of the market share, that other 5%. So, Research in Motion, which is a Canadian company, endured a very, very long patent lawsuit over the past couple years, which they really got. If you've ever had a client that's been involved in a lawsuit, you know that that takes them off focus of everything else. So this was a big deal. The playbook's out there. What's hitting right now, RIM is denying it, saying that no, we're committed to this, but there's a fire sale on the playbooks, and they're saying that they halted production. So what's leaking out is, don't know where the BlackBerry unit goes at this point. Or they could be rolling out something new. What's going to be important for you and your clients is knowing where information is going to come from. So basing your decision on what you get, Android or Apple iOS, is really going to be dictated by what your clients in your market areas, in your vertical market areas, are using. So right now you're probably getting stuff, QuickBooks and a myriad of other commonly known software that's out there. What you're going to start to see, these are the most 40 popular apps, accounting apps in the iTunes store. It could be pretty broad. you may be receiving stuff in different formats. But remember HTML5? Remember, HTML5 becomes a standard. So the integration of software, of how things interact with each other, that whole idea goes away in HTML5. Conceptually, everything's an app. The whole thing's an app. Remember that? So it all works together. Everything gets embedded together. You can interact with it together. So you're going to see some of this in the near term, possibly in the longer term, but it could all be changing overnight as well. So 2 years from now, this may be a conversation that's not even relevant. So I need your help on this one to see if I actually, if I got some of my points across. Let's pretend that these guys are either friends or enemies. So I need your input. Are these Facebook and Google? Are they friends or enemies? You read here. Actually, Facebook and Google at this level are sworn enemies. And here's why. And this is from the business side. Now I'll explain it, but we'll get to frenemies because I like that. Google, for a long time in the search market, owned search. They have a massive database. Their rank system, they can tell you where ads need to go, how you know, what Sergey and those guys did. You're going to make money here. Here's where it goes. They have this incredible database for search. Facebook, on the other hand, and there's an interesting joke, there's a cartoon, and I couldn't find it. And it's some guys down in Langley headquarters here at the CIA, and they said, oh my God, could you have imagined that we got all of these people to put in all their personal information, everybody they know, where they shop, what they do, what they like, what books they've read, what food they eat, and where they are at this point in time if we need to find them. Isn't that awesome? So Facebook, because of that, scares the crap out of Google. Think about it. Facebook can rifle shot market information to you individually and customized. Google can't deliver that on ads. They can get you the same thing that an old BPA audit does for a magazine circulation. Okay, now, Facebook and Google Plus. Because remember, Google Plus is the personal thing that really comes out against Facebook. So enemies or friends? Yeah, Facebook looks at Google Plus as the enemy at the gates. Facebook hasn't introduced Pages yet. Pages is the brand piece here. That's where it could get really interesting. Okay, Facebook and Apple. Friends, enemies? Friends? Frenemies. They're friendly enemies. There's rumor that when Bing was out there, that something happened in the meeting between young Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs that Apple left the meeting. And that was quite a while ago. So there's something that they're going to do. Now, Facebook, conjecture, rumor mill, is going to have a mobile device. And Facebook has announced that this Spartan project fits on the iPad, native HTML5. We saw the announcement, so they're going to work together. So it's kind of like understanding the relationships between these companies is somewhat like Middle Eastern politics. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Today. Tomorrow it may be someone else. Today, this is how it looks. So Apple and Google. Friends, enemies. They're frenemies too. If you use Safari on your tablet, what's the search engine? It's Google. It's the preferred search engine. It's still Google. So there's a relationship between Google and Apple at a different level. Remember, you got to think about these companies as multinational companies with lots of layers, like an onion. And they're related differently to each other. And how one level relates to another level does dictate upper level decision making. Google and Twitter. Frenemies, enemies, friends, neighbors, countrymen. Yes? Anything? Twitter like the person that doesn't exist on any of the Real Housewives show. Twitter is the person who helps everybody get along. Because Twitter gets along with everybody. Which really goes down when we talked about how YouTube developed. Twitter developed first an open API. They made it connect with everybody, and then they turned on functions. They connect with everybody. They work together with everybody incredibly well, including Apple. So then Apple's iOS and Android. I think we already know by where that lands. So, before we open up for questions, a couple final thoughts. In your organizations, what you need to think about is that the real problem that you're going to have with any of this is you. You're your own worst enemy on this. You've got to come up with a strategy to implement it for yourself. How you and your firm interact with your vertical markets is going to be the decision that helps you make the decision on what piece of hardware you get, which operating system you get. There's a lot of things that are, again, happening, so you're starting to see some of the news tweets, and this is all on the Twitter hashtag. So I'll let these roll through for a minute. And most of this is all breaking news. I think I've got one here. Did I mention that there's been a leak of what the new iPhone looks like in Brazil? Oh, there's the big 5 IT trends. That's some of this. Interesting, this article just came out after I'd already put together this presentation. Now somebody famous is talking about the same things. So this is the new iPhone. Look, it's bigger. So this was released by Foxconn. Foxconn makes all the hardware and a whole bunch of stuff. Interesting story about Foxconn. They're going to put 1 million robots in the next 3 years at one of their plants and replace their labor costs in China because their labor costs have become too high. So questions? Opening for everyone. Yes?
Work for an industry in the remodeling, kitchen and bath. I think the challenge that our IT staff is dealing with is the fact that the owner gets an iPad and thinks that these consumer-friendly devices for home use are going to be readily available and usable by our 30 salespeople in the field. Like, how can we take an iPad and make them more productive in the field when all their design work is on a proprietary software, you know, a CAD level software 2020, which is just, you know, legacy driven. And, you know, there's a naivety, I think, on the part of the owner that, you know, they're going to get productivity. And you look at what's a kitchen designer going to do in the field other than measure the home or whatever that an iPad is going to make them productive on. And that's the challenge I think we face in industry. You know, from the CPA firm, you know, yes, you know, your clients are going to be sending, you know, using these apps that are on the iPad and new file formats and whatever, how you interface with that. But I just think in the industry side, I'm not sure in small business, you know.
It's been 20 years I've been in manufacturing,
Yeah.
heavy engineering manufacturing,
Right.
CNC stuff, lots of CAD drawings,
CNCS.
lots of
All that.
SPC stuff.
Exactly.
This tablet is doing wonders because you can take a picture of something, you can send up the problem, you can take screenshots of inspection reports, you can, there's a ton of, I mean, how it's being used is new every day. What's being written for it is new every day. You're seeing, and let me talk about the manufacturing piece of your side of that.
We have manufacturing.
Right, right.
We manufacture countertops. We're
Right.
using CNCs, we're using,
Right.
you know, all that kind of stuff.
So there's another parallel thing that happens in that side of it, so how the salespeople use it. One, there's something called MT Connect. MT Connect is going to connect all those machines together and allow them to have a common language. That standard is written, so that exists. There's also a standard across the board that the ISO committee has developed for tooling and tooling specifications in libraries. So whereas there weren't standards before, there's standards being established in that side of it. As that help happens in parallel to salespeople using this. So if you have a product like Salesforce.com that integrates with the big SAP and Salesforce work together, you know, they're hand in glove. The problem, and this is the discussion I've had with a number of people with that remote Salesforce, with that engineering piece, there's no ACT program, you know, ACT exclamation point, Goldmine, a number of those other ones. They don't play well. One with social media, they play well with the old systems, but they don't even play well with databases, with other things. We're going to start to see, as that demand, that's going to be demand driven. You're going to start to see some stuff, and I know there's not stuff because I know exactly what you're looking for, because I'm looking for it for a couple of my clients. It doesn't exist that I found. So if anybody knows of that stuff, I need it too. So I can't help each other. Yes.
Well, many of us are here are with CPA firms, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with this iPad except check my email and get on the internet.
For doing work.
For doing work, yeah.
What kind of work? What kind of clients do you have?
All sorts of clients. Retail, wholesale, professional.
Okay, there's work that you bill, and there's work that enables you to bill. So there's the selling and networking portion of that. How do you communicate with your clients via email?
Mostly.
Do you have a LinkedIn account?
Yes.
Do you communicate with your clients through that?
Sometimes.
Do you share relevant articles through that?
More likely through email.
Where do you get your news? When you get something, when you get a piece of news that you want to share with the client, and you send it through email, so there's a news article, have you tried any other methods of sharing it that might be more efficient? In other words, if you post it to your status update on LinkedIn and hit the share button and send it to 50 of your people that you think, which can be pretty time saving, those are the functions that you can use them for. If you're looking at it to use heavy spreadsheet use, numbers ain't gonna cut it yet. Numbers just doesn't have all of those functions yet. You're still at Excel.
So it's a communication tool.
It's a communication tool.
Marketing.
Yes, it's a marketing and communications tool. But as we move forward, you're gonna see it become even more ubiquitous. It's gonna become part of you to where you can do that. What it's probably gonna do for your firm is that if you have a requirement where you have to have X number of hours per period to do tax work, you may find that those people can work from home and do other things more productively by using that tablet, because during commercial breaks they can be doing something. So the application of how you use this piece of hardware really comes down to you as the user and how you apply it. There's functions that you may not have thought of, like what I just described with LinkedIn, on how you communicate, that could be more time consuming now and make you less productive or less of a thought leader to your clients than where it could become. I hope that answers your question.
Somewhat, yeah.
So it seems like the iPad and the tablet are really, communication and interconnectivity is really seamless, and there's lots to be used for that. But the technical aspects of our jobs, like using ProSystem or Excel or Adobe Acrobat, those kinds of things are a little light in that area so far.
Yes. Yes, but, and this is the big but, it's HTML5, which means no matter where you're at, what kind of device you're on, no matter what you're doing, that problem of connecting goes away. everything is embedded. If you can touch it from a you'll be able to do it not only on a tablet, but on a phone. This is a real game changer. You're going to be able to interact with everything. So if what you know now as a spreadsheet, as an app that's on a computer, no, it's cloud-based. And anybody can access it, and you can set permission levels. Does that make sense? So this is a pretty dramatic shift.
So basically, the only limitation then is the screen size. All your other hardware is irrelevant, how small or how large.
That's what's coming down the pipe.
Comm speed too, communication speed.
Yes, that's
And,
really.
yeah. Oh, as long as it's Wi-Fi, it's good. 3G, yeah, anyway. I think in the future there'll be phone bottlenecks. If 4G is, it'll be expensive in towers and stuff.
Yeah, until we get all set. Good.
When you were talking about more conversational, what can you tell us about voice control? I mean,
Siri.
It's been bad, it just hasn't been working well. Do you see that getting any better?
There it is. 8:30 this morning. This is Siri. Apple bought it. iOS 5 in beta has Siri on it. Then Siri is interactive. That's Wolf right now. You ask it a question, it gives you the answer. So you talk to it. Which could be interesting in Virginia for driving, because now are you truly against the law if you're talking to it? But, yes, no?
Yeah, well, today it's been just like command driven, you have to like, it's limited, you don't need recognizes, certain things. It's an evolving process, I would think.
What kind of mobile phone do you have?
iPhone.
Go get. Hang on. I'll give you I'll show you what it looks like. Where is it?
If you go to the App Store, there's an app called Siri Assistant.
Yes. Yes.
It's free.
Yes. Go there, but you may not need to get it tomorrow.
It's there now.
No, I understand, but since Apple just bought them, that probably announced because that's part of the new OS. Download it, but I would probably put $100 on that it's embedded in the OS tomorrow. We can talk about that when I'm not on a camera or a Ustream. Yes?
So where does this leave Microsoft?
Microsoft. I'm not sure where they fit in that model. Microsoft, and you know, I put the IP stuff up there, which was okay, but there was some thought bubbles coming from people at Microsoft that I didn't feel were appropriate to put up here for public consumption on what their feelings are with regard to mobile to begin with, or apps. I don't know where Microsoft lands on this. They're not in this game. Anything else? Well, thank you very much for coming.
I hope that
How you use it now today, how you use it.
That's the question. I went to a conference in June, about 600 CPAs, and quite a few had the